Can you see the slide now?
We can. It's not the right view for us yet, though. We can see all your. Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to giving this webinar. So my name is Nguyen-Trung. So today I will talk about the recent applications in using generative AI in conducting thematic analysis. And I know that we have only 1 hour, so will try to cover as much as I can. Two approaches. One is the coding approach, and one is non-coding approach. But I think I will give more time for coding approach in our Q&A and give more time to the non-coding approach, the recent application. So let's get started. So today we will go through some data and methods, and then some approaches. The first one is the guide approach. That is the guided AI thematic analysis, a coding approach that using AI. And the second one is narrative integrated thematic analysis, NITA, a non-coding approach. So let's begin. So currently we have a few thematic analysis approaches. And if we run it from small Q to big Q, is we have a coding reliability thematic analysis, we have coding thematic analysis, and we have reflexive thematic analysis. And these one use different philosophical assumptions, and they require different approaches and different principles. On the far left is you have small q that use exactly positivism principles that require you to test and validate the analysis. And between you have codebook thematic analysis such as template analysis, matrix analysis, or framework method analysis. That's kind of in between. For example, pragmatism or critical realism. So it's more flexible in coupled with the epistemological assumption to guide the approach. So you have more freedom. And on the far right, you have reflexive thematic analysis by Brown Clark that require to be more poor quality research. So the reason why I present it is because each of these approaches have different way to theme generation. For example, small Q approach consider theme is something that you discover in the text, in the data you have. So you go in there and you discover like you discover gold in the sand. Meanwhile, reflexive thematic analysis consider you need to construct the themes. When you read the data, you construct that with your participants, with your assumption and your even your bias that all lead to your construction of the themes. And in between, you have the theme that can be developing early, but that's a priori themes can later revise, later adapt it to the emerging themes during the data. So it kind of combine between the both. And in my approach that I developed for coding and non-coding approach using AI, I tend to locate my approaches in the betweens that use pragmatisms and also can combine theme develop early. So it means that you can develop thematic framework before you conduct the data analysis, but you keep that pretty flexible and keep that to the emergence of the themes that you receive from the data. And I also learned that from Brown Clark that we tend to label and tend to construct the themes as something that patterns of shared meaning. So the themes we label can be more meaningful. So that is a position. So today I will rely on the public data set that provided by Lumivero. So the data set is names environmental change in Dao East. So this is the based on the original research conducted in 2008, 2009, and it contains 11 short interviews. And each interview is about 2,000 words, and we have 11 interviews of total 20,000 words. So the reason why I give the word count because we know that AI have context window that is a maximum tokens we can use to proceed inputs, output, and reasoning tokens. So one token, every 100 tokens is equal about 70 words. So it means that the data we provide to the AI have the max have the ceilings of the tokens that AI can proceed. So we need to concern about that. So each interview in this data set is about 6 pages and 2,000 words, and they are already structured by the topics. So we have the topic from Q1 to Q6, 6 topics. And then let we go into the approaches. So my first approach is that coding approach. This is based on King templates analysis, and this is normally go through 6 phases. One is familiarization with the data, then moving to the coding, then clustering is when you group the data, group the codings into the cluster or categories, and then you develop the templates. Template is something like this. It means that you organize hierarchically the course into different levels of hierarchy. And then you imagine that you have teams, and under team you have sub teams or have clusters, and under cluster you have codes or subcodes, something like that. So one way of organize the data. And then in stage 5, you have modify the template, using the template to apply to the rest of the data and like indexing the data. So you have this template and you put everything, put information in the transcript into this template. And then 6 is using the template to interpret the data and write up. So in my experiments with ChatGPT, I developed 4 stages. So first stage is the data familiarizations. So in this stage, we will ask the support from generative AI to produce different kind of summaries to help us get familiarization with the data. So the summaries can be as long as 3 pages or 6 pages, or it can be in bullet points. And then in stage 2 is the preliminary coding. We try to ask it to help us generate a list of initial codes. So the course will focus on we working with each individual transcripts, and then in each transcript we try to generate list of codes, and then we apply the list of code in the first can be first one transcript or first 2 or 3 transcripts, and then apply that list of codes to the rest of the interviews. And in at the end of this stage, you form a revised list of codes and prepare for the formation of template. So test 3 is where you try to work with templates by organize it in a different level of hierarchies. You group codes into clusters to form initial templates. And at this stage, we expect to define the cluster meanings and the code meaning. We can distinguish this code and other codes. And then we try to modify the templates through generating more subcodes. So it means that within each code, we try to go deeper, find different nuance, and try to generate subcodes. And then at the end of this stage, we finalize the template by recoding and recategorizing. Um, and then stage four is developing the theme. So at this stage, we generate themes based on the final template that we developed in the previous stage. And we try to edit the themes based on what we interpret. So at this stage, we rely more on our interpretation and generate overarching themes to connect every themes in the data set that we have just found out. So for each of these states, we need to develop some kind of uh, a reflexive space to record any stages. So if you look at the into the paper that maybe I'll be share with you, so we can see that we have steps in the far left, and you have the sub step and the prompts and then another column called research rows to check and evaluate the outputs that by AI. For example, you can ask the AI to generate provide the summary of this transcript and then highlight in three bullet points or provide with 400 words summary of key ideas. So at this stage, the prompt is try to focus on that. Um, here another the stage. So in these tables, I provide the steps and also the prompts that you can use. But let's make it a little bit more exciting. Um, let we move on. If you already use the AI, so
Ian, may I just clarify that those prompts are the actual text that you would input into ChatGPT in this instance?
exactly,
Right. Okay.
exactly. So in ChatGPT, if you see the ChatGPT here, you can see that I already create some kind of project. So in ChatGPT, you have the feature that project, and in here you can upload the project files. So it means that you can upload the paper, original paper, contain the definition, the procedure of the approach, and you upload the interviews. Of course, it's have to pass through every ethical clearance procedure, and then after that, you provide it with the instructions. Later, I will talk about this, but the instructions provide the guides of how ChatGPT should behave towards what we prompt. And then in this, I will ask it something like, please study the data approach in my original paper and tell me what four stages of data approach, something like this. So this one will requires to study the knowledge base that we upload. So it will provide with the data familiarizations, preliminary codings, template formation, and refinement. But it's still not really specific yet. So let me go through like please provide because I know already the table. So I provide the table, reproduce the table. So table one is contain the table that we have just seen, it including the steps, sub steps, and GPT for tasks, the tasks that we assign to AI, and then the role that we perform. For example, after it's produced the summary, we need to read it and provide the reflection. Can you see it? It's small. It good? Okay. So so it means that it can read through the text, but let we take a step further. So for example, it already have the context. So please perform prompt 1.1, right, for Barbara interview. So Barbara is one of the interview in the 11 interviews that we have. So with this is it can be more easier because the prompts already listed above, and and the interviews already in the database, so it can perform like this. And it asks me something like, "Would you like me to proceed immediately to prompt 1.3, 1.2?" And I would say yes, and it's go on with the next prompt. So this prompt is trying to produce different type of summaries. For example, in the bullet points. So it will proceed. And would you like to take me to prompt 1.3? I said yes. Let's remove any research reflection for demonstration purposes at this stage. So it's produced something like this. And then this is a longer summary. So at this stage, we try to understand different type of summaries so that we can get familiar with the data. Of course, we should read the original one. And then it asks me to proceed to step two. Uh, let's proceed step two for Barbara interview. So the purpose of step two is try to produce a list of codes for one individual transcript. So for template analysis, they will ask, they will help us to advise us to go through the first few transcripts to develop some kind of transcripts list of codes. So for you that for the rest of the codes. So you can see that it's help you to generate the table like this because in now our prompts we ask it to produce this type table, and it provide the code description of the code and the quotation for to check it, right? So so that is the thing that you can produce, and and we can go on with this from the background interview to other interviews in your data set to even develop further the coding approach. So probably I'm going to stop there and move on to the next ones. We can come back to do this later on. Okay, so that is uh, coding approach. So that is coding approach. Try to develop the templates, and then you apply the templates to the rest of the interviews, and you try to index your interviews with those frameworks that you already developed, and you try to find themes through those. Um, but let's think otherwise. So we know that coding has been dominating our approach for a while now, and we try to do first by reading the interview and try to find the key relevant data set, the data segments, and try to give it the code, right? But how about we go directly from having the data to generate the themes without go through the codings? So in my second paper, I developed a approach called NITA, Narrative Integrated Thematic Analysis. So this NITA contain the first two steps. So we can apply to the first two steps to Gaita too. The first one is develop an initial perfect procedure of reflexive space to guide the interaction with AI. The second is trying to develop some kind of data familiarizations and also familiarization with the systems. So the systems, how we can get um, use and setting up the systems for the analysis purposes. The stage three is trying to generate candidate teams. So you go directly into the generator themes. However, do not stop there. You go on to check the themes by go through the constructing individual narratives. So you know that in our thematic analysis, as as far as we go from data segment to categories to code, from code to categories, to from category to themes. We stay further away from stories, from incidents, from the stories that participant tells, from the contextual information, right? So we lose some kind of the sense of actual relationship that they have. So in this approach, stage four try to come back from what you found very abstract themes, very abstract level, but try to come back the stories by individual stakeholders. So construct individual narrative is try to come back for each of the transcripts and try to build story that they told. And stage five is try to develop a cross-case narratives. So once you have the all the individual stories, you try to develop some kind of cross-case comparatives analysis. And stage six is try to write up. So this combine a little bit different thematic approach, but I will skip this for the purpose of today. So stage one, planning the perfect procedure. So everyone's come to generative AI have the fear that it can dominate it. Right now, I think that generative AI is very different from computer assisted qualitative data analysis like NVivo. Of course, NVivo, Atlas, MarkQDA already have generative AI integrated in their systems. But I mean the software that we use for before generative AI, and it was not possible. Like you dump the text into those softwares and you ask it analyze the data for me. It was not impossible, right? But right now, it kind of possible with generative AI. You dump the text, you dump the data set, and you ask it analyze the data for me. It actually did. It can provide that for you. But can we take it? Can we outsource everything to generative AI? Is the questions, right? And if we outsource everything, can we lose our identity, right? So in this procedure, I got perfect. It's a procedure that we reserve that reflexivity. So purpose is where you specify what is your research objectives. Not every research objective can be performed by generative AI. So you need to identify which one is the most relevant. And then you envision steps to reach the objectives. And then you realize it by thinking of what is the output that AI can, need to produce. For example, we need three bullet point output. We need a table that combine this column and this rows, and you need to define them in advance. So which type output that we need from AI. Formulate is think of the how to formulate effective prompts to obtain that output. Experiment is ongoing process, iterative process that we go back and forth with AI to have the right output. And check it where we critically check and reflect on the output. And tune is where we adapt the prompts, but even adapt the objective that we have. So this is a process of iterative and reflexive development. And you can remain this throughout the process of 6 stages. So this is one of the example. So I call it a monitoring, evaluation, and learning space. And if you are familiar with the project, it's a kind of mail process that you keep to maintain that. So maintain it the Google spreadsheet is a very good way to do it. So state one also concerned about the prompt. So I think that introduce a few techniques here is also relevant. First of all, if you are going into ChatGPT and you say summarize the report for me, summarize the data set for me, so that is called zero shot technique. It means that you don't give it any kind of example of the output that you want. Give it anything like just only the task, the command. But normally that is not really good for the later stage, only good for brainstorming. Later stage you can use some kind of different techniques for example, assigning AI a role. It's called role-playing prompting. So it means that for different prompting, different roles, you can identify, for example, I as water manager working at blah blah and summarize this report. So the way we identify the water manager working at a water corporation, it try to identify a connection for ChatGPT or AI to connect with the data segment that it was trained on, and by that connection, it more precise or more you lean toward the data set that you water knowledge to be able to respond to our prompts. The
Ian, can
second,
I just leap in briefly? In your other paper, I noticed that you told ChatGPT to act like a qualitative research
yeah,
assistant.
exactly. So it's work with the principles that we try to develop for qualitative research. So imagine that it's trained on the vast amount of data, including qualitative papers and principles. But that is only general role assignment. We have to give it more specific guidelines. So second technique is called few shots prompting. So it means that you give it the design examples of your output. For example, you artist, instead of summarize this report, you say summarize this report in key bullet points or in a table with this kind of format. So you specify the output that you need AI to produce. So by this way, you can have more tailored outputs rather than the random type outputs that AI generate and maybe not really helpful. Third is step-by-step guide. It's called chain of thought prompting. So it means that generative AI will activate kind of reasoning that will think step by step. So there's two way of doing this. One is you just add a simple sentence to those prompts, like think this step by step. It can catalyze its reasoning, or you can provide a list of actions to guide through the action. For example, instead of summarize this report, you can say summarize this report by reading the table of contents, reading each section, and summarize each section. So you provide more tailored procedure. So it can more helpful. But my framework is try to combine different techniques in one prompt, so you can use it flexibly. But in prompt, you can have that actor, including actor specify what is the roles, context provide initial background information, or even the concepts that we want AI to understand. For example, coding is understand as coding labels, themes understand as pattern of shared coding, set meanings, something like that. So in this, we provide the specific knowledge that you need to know. That is, we identify the common outputs. We try to specify what type of formats that we need. References is refer to the data or the document that it need to refer or rely on. So here's one of example. You are a quality research assistant, that's actor. You will help me to code the following document in according to the questions that are tasked, right? And code is understand as the labels, assign summary, summative, salience, essence, capturing evocative attribute to a portion of data, a definition from Saranya. So that is actually contextual information. The final output is a table like this. It's a output specify format. And here's the transcript right? So that is refer the references. So in in the process that you use like we have just experimenting with AI, you don't need to repeat every part of the file components. But for example, if you already define the rows at the beginning, so you don't need to repeat that. You only repeat the tasks or even the provide more the concepts or the output. So the second stage is try to prepare the data and generalize system. So there, for the data, you in the second papers, I try to provide a little bit difference, like prepare the 11 transcripts, but in PDF format, and then combine or leave them together. Uh, so a total words of the older 11 is 20,000 words, and then you upload all of these into ChatGPT. So the formats, I will remove the topics. Like in the original ones, it have Q1 connection to DAOs. So I will remove that to avoid the assumption in the text we give the ChatGPT. The second one is you turn off data for training. So in this, in ChatGPT, you have the function that improve data model into model for everyone. So you turn it off to avoid use our data for training. Is it too small? Okay. And then you provide this setting up with the use the row and guides. So in my second paper have specialization of rows and guides. Row and guides can use in the setting of AI. So in ChatGPT you have something like two questions. What test should ChatGPT have? So in this you guys framework to provide the guidelines how ChatGPT should behave, should respond to our questions. And the second question is anything else ChatGPT should know about you? Is try to introduce the role frameworks. Introduce what is your roles. Your role is medical researcher, health researcher, qualitative researchers, and you perform the task like this. It can get the terms or get the language right for you. However, there's a second part of that is that you can create a customized GPT. So in ChatGPT, you also can create your GPT. We call custom GPT. So in there you can create and in config you can provide the instruction for how ChatGPT should behave or should conduct the analysis for you. And also you have the chance to upload your data into the system so it can use that as a knowledge base. And the second way is the one that I have just shown you, is that you just open the chat and use the project's features. So in the project, you create a folder like Nita approach, and you start training by upload the guys into the chat, and then upload the files so it can help you to behave in this and use the knowledge base for the rest of the analysis that like we seen earlier. So in the second approach, I try to develop the initial thematic framework. So the key here is that try to generate any candidates that ChatGPT can do by reading the data set. So the prompt is try to something like based on the uploaded interviews, can you generate themes in response to research questions? How do these people connect to DAOs? So I try to add the same questions like the first paper that I used coding approach to try to compare them together. And I try to provide some kind of contextual information, like theme is defined the pattern share meanings across the data set, relevant to research questions. The final output should be something like this. So I also have theme table. Column one is themes, column two is a description of themes, Column 3 is quotation. So this is trying to provide the analysis for uh, guidance for ChatGPT. And this kind of the theme that it provide after the using the first prompt. So it can provide a table like this. Um, with the first column is themes, second is description and quotation. And in this, we run on three occasions. And the first occasion is returns eight themes. It brings sense of belonging and legacy, community cohesion and support, natural beauty and environment, cultural tradition and heritage, challenges of change and development, connection to the water, economic shifts, and resistance to outsider influence. So you can see that the way it name the themes here is very typical to generative AI because it have on basically one way to name the themes and also one way to name the code is based on core topic based nouns. Every theme, every code that it give, if we don't guide, it provide the topic based now or use now to describe the themes. So it means that if we read something like natural beauty and environment, by reading it we don't really know what the meanings of that themes, right? So it only gives you the topic, it don't give you the content of that themes. So that is the one limitation that you should note it. So how can we do it better? So we can extend the code to understand better the meanings. For example, from here, I ask this, the code is too short. Can you please extend the code to involve longer quotations? So the longer quotation can return something like this. It can you can see the red one is previous quotation that it's listic, but it's very short and it's not contain much meaning. So when it extends both previous and second parts, and it provide more information, and we can easier check it with the original one. So when I have run through three occasions, I have the theme list, and it's provide something like this. So occasion one, eight themes. Occasion two, six themes, and occasion three, six themes. And you can see that if we can go more occasions as we want, but after my three occasions, I see that there's a general patterns and comparison between these occasions. So and I can use this for the first thematic framework. Um, and develop something like this. And when I compare that with the themes my first paper, you will see that almost all the themes, the first column and the third columns, almost the themes is the same. In my first paper, I found five themes, and it provides six themes. And you can see only the sixth theme that resisting change and development that's not found in the first paper. So it means that at this stage, the coding approach the non-coding approach can generate themes um, which quite similar to the result of coding approach. It means that we don't need to go through the whole process of coding to generate themes, but we can go through the non-coding approach to directly generate themes. But the key question is try to check it. Yes, Api?
Ian, sorry, just another clarification. So the codes on the left here you generated through the non-coding approach, and you're comparing them to the codes you generated in your previous paper in which you used coding on the
Yeah.
right. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
themes by 2024 papers.
right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So the themes almost exactly the same. And the middle table is the theme that I try to ask ChatGPT. The theme you generate is not really meaningful. Can you please help me develop the themes based on the quotations, the verbatim quotation by participants to make it more meaningful. So it come up with something like this. For example, heritage and family roots is a typical topic-based noun, and it doesn't contain any meaning, right? So the theme it come up with ties that run deeper than the land. So it sound more meaning like the previous one, or it can have the in vivo quotations like resisting change to develop in change to we don't like change. So it's capture one of the participants quotation to provide the themes. So it's more meaningful and more specific to the data. And after that, we go into the stage four, constructing the in-real narratives, where we try to run these themes, apply the thematic framework below, and try to create a story for Barbara. So you go through each transcripts. The story must represent major themes in this thematic framework. The framework in this case is used to make sense of Barbara case. The final output is a table with the following columns: themes, background stories, relation to the themes, and then quotations. If you cannot find evidence in background case for any themes, highlight in the table. And here the thematic framework. So it will run something like this. So it means that we already have the thematic frameworks, but that's not done yet. We need to check that with each individual case to try to understand its inverse stories. So in this, it use the themes and it check the inverse stories, come up with that, and we also read the inverse cases and try to develop the narrative for each participants. And then it's also conduct the narratives. For example, if we want to deep dive into background case, we can ask it to, based on what you have just analyzed in story, do you see any themes that not captured in the thematic framework? So by this, we want to capture any theme that's unexpected or outside of what we developed earlier. So it also ensure that we do not miss any nuance in the stories, and it's quite important for us to develop a fully mature thematic framework. And the next one is try to repeat the prompts for the each of the individual cases. And then you have the different ones, different stories. And stage five is try to construct qualitative narratives where you use the thematic framework to compare across cases. So in here, you use the thematic framework you have. So at this stage, you already revise the thematic framework based on individual stories, but now you want to compare different cases. So the case here you can divide based on it's not really case in as about a system in case study approach, but more like a variable. For example, if you have gender, you have age groups, or you have ethnicity, and you want to compare across those groups, you can use this approach. So, for example, use this approach, try to analyze differences and similarities in the connection to Taoist across gender in relevant interviews. So it will come up something like this. So you have themes, you have male perspectives, you have female perspective, and you have each of the themes listed for males and for female. Of course, we cannot accept it, something like this, and we can go on and check with the data. But assume that we already go through each individual's cases above. So at this stage, we have that knowledge to check and evaluate what ChatGPT can produce. So you also can go on and construct the story by gender and by groups that you found. And at stage, we can use more of our interpretation rather than the ChatGPT provide. And stage 6 is try to write up, and this stage we write by ourselves, of course, and we try to focus on create the narratives that connect all the themes. So probably I will stop there for questions because I think we only have about 10 minutes left. But happy to provide any explanation or anything like that later.
Thank you, Kian. Victoria, you've got a question.
Uh, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's very interesting because I've been playing around with other, not for my qualitative data analysis, but other things. So it's great to see your stuff around prompts and things because I think that's where a lot of the art lies. I had a question about the interviews themselves, and were they quite structured interviews? So, I just noticed that there was maybe like you had sort of question one that you removed, and you had each of the participants their answer to question one.
Mm.
Now, when I do my interviews, I really follow quite an unstructured approach, and it's very conversational. Um, does it rely on the transcripts having a little bit more structure? Do you know what I'm asking?
Mm, what do you mean that when interactive with generative AI, right? And you provide the
It's
structure.
probably more about the transcripts themselves and what qualities they have to have in the first place. Do,
Oh, right.
do they need to be done like, yeah, I guess I'm wondering if the transcripts are really quite different because the interviewer has a very conversational style.
Mm.
How might that impact kind of the ChatGPT analysis?
Yeah, I think that it can affect the way that it identify the themes and topics.
Mm,
So, for
mm,
example, in the data set that I have here, they already structured by 6 topics, and it can immediately use that 6 topics to construct the themes. But we all
yeah,
know that topic is not themes, right? So if your transcript is more conversational interviews, so I imagine that it will structure and it will span across different teams. You can move from this team to other teams based on what participants provide the answer, right? So
yeah.
it can diverse and can unstructure. So I think that it's will require more time and for both us and ChatGPT to identify the themes
Yeah.
because they are not yet there. They need to analyze either through coding or either non-coding approach.
Mm. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Betty.
Yes, I wanted to thank you very much for this presentation. It's really, really beneficial. I'm concerned about the very beginning, the ethics of the data that's out there. How do we preserve privacy? Where does this data go? Do you have any advice for us? How do we actually tell the ethics committee that we're going to do it on ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think that to address the ethics, I think it's really important to for us as quality researchers. And actually, we have not this paper, but these other papers. I developed some kind of proceeds that contains called LIPS PVD. So it contains several stages that we have to go through before we apply for ethics for using the AI. Legal consideration is where we consider what is the data privacy for from AI companies. Let's take for example Claude by Anthropic. It default that it will not collect any data from users to train its models. But for other, for example, ChatGPT or Gemini by Google, you need to turn off the data for training in the settings. So it means that each AI company have different type of data users, and that is listed in their data policies. And that's kind of legal consideration we need to consider before we engage with any type tools. and we need to know where to disable that function, right? And the second part is that we need to, for example, consult with the institutions that we are working for. For example, my Monash University have the guidelines to work with Microsoft Copilot.
So
So
do
that
we.
is the AI that recognized by Monash. So I think that University of Sydney also have that policy, and each of the university have consider and pass through what is the tools that are relevant for their staff. Second part is ethics guidelines, where we consider what is the ethical guidelines for using AI. For example, COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics, it consider that AI cannot perform as authors, right? So it means it can be perform the analysis as author, and that is the task that we need to do by ourselves. And any ethical guidelines, for example, by division and college, provide some five concerns, and I think that we need to consider that. That is data ownership and rights when submitting AI data to commercial companies. So it means that we need to consider that before we upload the data privacy and transparency. So when we use any sensitive data with share from participant, we need to apply for ethics clearance. Tell the institutional review board that we intended to use AI. Secondly, we need to including the risks of using generative AI in explanatory statements, and also the consent form. I think that is important. The most important to we ask in the consent form: do you agree for us to use generative AI to proceed your data with the following risks listed in the explanatory statement? And interpretative sufficiency, biases, researcher responsibility, a lot of things, something like this. So application is where we apply for ethical applications, apply through explanatory statement, consent form. Privacy is where we need to anonymize the documents and pseudonymize the documents. So anonymize, you removing or replacing any personal information that so that person cannot be identified, converting data, personal data into non-personal data. And if you can do that, it can remove the concerns. Or you pseudonymize data by transform the personal data by giving the participant the pseudonyms or the nicknames. So I think that this is something we usually do. But if there's something like personal stories that can easier identify with the participants, we also need to concern. So there are a lot of things, but probably I stop there.
Well, thank you.
Meng, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. I think that is really inspiring. And I have two questions. The first one is that actually your study is based on the ChatGPT 4.0, and we have lots of models right now. And are there any like differences in their performance? And do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, probably I will answer that first. Based on the currently we have at least four model that at the tops. We have ChatGPT by OpenAI. We have Gemini by Google. We have Grok by XAI. Right? We have Cloud by Anthropic, and recently we have DeepSeek from China. So my experience not with the recent DeepSeek, but with the other general purpose AIs, and I think that currently the each of them have different strengths and weaknesses. But I think if choose one that can do a lot of things, I think ChatGPT is at the top, but to have one that you can develop the task and building some kind of trust relationship, I think Claude is something that you can try. That is not experimental approach, but that's based on my institutional experiences. Because when I use Claude, I feel like it doesn't hallucinate so much, and it only perform the based on what we ask for and the policy. And I think to read the policy by Anthropic also feel more trust in them, because they fold that they will not collect data based on user inputs. So that is their fault. And we don't need to do anything before going to cloud. So I think that is one thing that I recommend. So I think for the purpose of data analysis, ChatGPT, cloud is a top two, I think, for the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's also based on the prompts we give to the AI, right? So, and the second question is that I noticed that you mentioned the task that you used the word about like 20,000. And considering that sometimes in our interview transcripts are quite long, and so do you think is that the kind of like optimal length for AI coding, or and how well do these models handle this long text? Yeah, this is the second question.
Yep. Thank you for that. Like I said, we have the basically AI have the limitation of context window. So before it's defined maximum token that combine input token and output token. But right now it also consist of the reasoning tokens. For example, GPT-4, it can proceed up to 128,000 tokens. It's equal about 96,000 tokens, 1,000 words. So it means that when we input a word about 90,000 words into ChatGPT, that is data set we have, and we ask it to perform. So it means that it's like the reasoning tokens and the output token to produce the output first, and it's likely to hallucinate our it outputs. So it means that we need to consider that. And my advice that we break our data into smaller chunks of text. For example, instead of asking it to analyze the whole data set, focus on each individual interviews. So it will, divide the task into smaller ones, so it can, more specify with the AI. So I think that is one way.
Okay, thank you.
Ian, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. Kim, may I ask if it's possible for you to send me your slides and share them with the group? Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Including your LEAP PVD ethical considerations slides?
Yeah, I will include that.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. This has been a mind-blowing talk. It's a lot for us to think about and process and figure out how we could start to apply these techniques. So thank you so much for leading us through this really complicated terrain.
Thank you. My pleasure. Is so happy to talk and see all of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Thanks, Abby. Bye.